All right, everybody can see my screen now. So we are in a situation that is very unique, as Larbi mentioned. We are in a situation of a pandemic, and the situation makes it very difficult to manage our project, but there's tools and techniques that can help you to manage your project successfully while we're in lockdown, while we are trying to do, of course, I'm sure some projects have stopped, cannot do the construction work, but for sure there's techniques that can make your team still be collaborative, work together in achieving those results. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how we can use collaborative tools, either online, on your smartphone, to make interesting and collaborative work. So the key objective is, we're going to recap a bit. So I'm sure that we have different level of project management knowledge among the participants this evening. So what we're going to quickly do is introduce the key concept and components of project management. Following that, it will be very brief, so stay with me if you're an expert, if you've been managing project for more than 20 years. So please hold on, this will be very brief. It will be about 7 to 8 minutes to really recap and making sure that all participants have the same basic terminology and same understanding. Once we have done this quick recap on the basic, we're going to talk about share virtual tools to assist your team to convert from working face-to-face to collaborative teamwork. We're going to focus on 3 aspects: people, process, and communication. And of course, we want to leave this session today with what are the key successful elements for virtual teams. All right. So quickly, a project is what? A project is a temporary endeavor taken to a unique product, service, or result, right? So building a bridge is a project. Of course, the maintenance of the bridge would be an operation. How do we differentiate between a project and a program? A lot of time we have a loan agreement that says it's a project, but then when we look and study carefully all our loan agreements and our project appraisal document or PAD, we realize actually we are in the context of a program. What's a program? It's a set of projects that are coordinated and managed in such a way to get the most results, which have a common goal. Project management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and technique for project activities and project requirements. All right, so different projects are in nature originated by different reasons, right? Some projects are just, there's a lot of traffic in a city, there's a need, there's a really, it has economic impact, we need to create public transport, but in some other situation, there's either a crisis, an opportunity. The World Bank or the African Development Bank decided to give loans for climate change. So maybe it was not your priority in the first place, but they say, wait a minute, there's potential fund that we could take advantage of, and we decide to take the opportunity. So every project starts with a different origin, and it can be from a need, crisis, to an opportunity. Once you have identified that, you start defining what will be the project needs and what you're going to be your project objective. So who are going to be working on that project? What are the materials? What's the resources? And start deciding your end-to-end systematic process. Of course, the objective is that you see a change, an effect, right? So you want to see result. So if I have a traffic issue, can I make sure that maybe in 5 years' time, we have solved or reduced or improved the circulation in the capital? So all these projects have different purposes and objective, but keep in mind there's always an origin that can vary depending on the need analysis. All right, so we call it the project management golden triangle. Every project have constraints, and the key constraints are always limited to the cost, time, and quality. If we had all the money in the world, would be great. We could achieve a lot of time, but the reality is that we have limited funds, and sometimes we have, for political reason or for other emergency, have limited time. And of course, we make choices when we choose the quality of the material we're buying, the quality of the project. So if I'm in a situation such as 10 years ago, a decade in Indonesia and Malaysia, the region I'm in right now, When we had a tsunami, we had constraint. And what was the constraint is we had a lot of people that were stranded. So what do you do? The constraint would, number one, would be time. You offer time. And then because you're trying to bring basic resources being water, food, to those that were stranded by the situation. So every project have different constraints that will impact. A really important terminology is scope. What is the scope? Every project have a defined scope. Are we building 10 schools or are we building only 2? Are we increasing the access to healthcare in a specific region to how many people? So scope, I like to say, is the boundaries of the project, the limitation that we have. And unfortunately, sometimes what we do is, especially if we're in a project where we're running out of money because maybe the US dollar has increased, so your cost is higher, you might be able to extend your project time and say, ask the World Bank or the African Development Bank, I need an extra 6 months, I need another year. That can be happen. But often as well, what happens is sometimes when we don't have all and we are limited in resources, we might reduce our scope of work. So these are the golden triangle. Every project is limited by these constraints. So keep that in mind. Okay, so I'll try to be quick. Every project is unique, even if you're building or constructing a road 1 kilometer or 100 kilometers, every project are different. They're unique in the context they're in, unique in the process. So the way you construct your road in a certain rural area versus the capital will have different. Of course, some project that we repeat over time, the advantages would be that you're building best practices. So there's knowledge that you acquire that will help you reproduce similar projects. But at the same time, keep in mind that each context is different. We mentioned quickly already that it's limited and predefined in duration, so it's temporary in nature. Huh? It's not the maintenance, it's something that has a beginning and an end. We talked about the golden triangle, the different constraint of a project. Keep in mind, now we'll talk about the project life cycle. When do you start a project? When are you executing? So it's a dynamic process. I like to say that it's not a staircase. Huh? It's not like, oh, I've done initiation and I stop here. I go to planning and I never go back. It is a dynamic process, and we'll see there's overlap. So you might be planning while you're executing at the same time. So you'll see that that's very dynamic and fluid in some time. Very, very important. Managing different stakeholders. Don't forget who are stakeholders, people that are directly or indirectly influenced by or impacted by your project. Each individual have different interests. They are human, they have heart, they have empathy, they might be in favor of your project, they might be against. So people might change. People that have supported you at the beginning might change their mind in the middle. It is very difficult to manage stakeholder. There's tools and techniques. Of course, if you join one of SETYM seminar, we talk about this extensively. And lastly is uncertainties. And I cannot talk more about uncertainties as we are facing now, a pandemic where there's a lot of unknowns. We don't know what's going to happen, when we're going to find a vaccine. And this uncertainty is really the new norm, isn't it? We talk about VUCA, which is volatility, uncertainty, and complexity. And what that means is that things are changing. And I can give you an example. I manage a project in Africa, in Senegal, and we were installing then the VISA technology to all universities. And by the time I was completing the project, the technology was already obsolete. Why? Because Senegal on the coast had already fiber optics. But when the VISA was installed either in Mali, Niger, or Chad, that was great because they're landlocked countries and they didn't have access to the fiber optic then. So uncertainties, changes are really the new norm, and we'll have to learn how to be agile and how to adapt quickly, while still having a plan. Okay, so I'm going quickly. According to the PMI, there's 10 knowledge areas. Those are all important that you have to have in your project plan and that you have to think of while you're executing your project, from The integration, a lot of people say, what it means integration? Integration is the connection of all these 9 domains of knowledge or area of knowledge, from procurement to human resources and risk. We'll talk a bit more in depth later on. All right, I want to talk about the project lifecycle, and depending on the project, on the phase of the project you're in now, interestingly, what I would like to share with you today is different tools that can really help you depending on the phase you're in. So according to PMI, there's 5 phases to the project lifecycle. The World Bank would see 6 because there's negotiation between the country that's getting the loan or not, but each phase have a different purpose. So usually at the initiation stage, that's why we try to understand the context, we're trying to understand the problem, and the outcome of the initiation is to really have selected a project and define the basic. You want to define your project charter, which is the basic of your project, just high level, how much you think it would be, who it is for, and so on. As you see in the graph, planning is a large phase, and a lot of our webinars talk about planning, because planning is, if you know where you're going, it's easier to correct when you are going off track. So planning is very important. Of course, the majority of every project is done in executing. And the reason is because that's where we get the most result. Closing is not to be forgotten. It's a small part. They also talk about lesson learned, closing your accounts, how we do, is there any ways that we could do better in the future? Is there going to be a phase 2? Is there things that are not completed? How are you going to transfer this project to the project host, the ministry or the government agency that will be taking care of this project? And of course, one of the very important phases, the monitoring and control that go overlap all 4 other phases, which is to follow, right? Which monitoring and control means tracking, evaluating our project. All right, so I would like to go with our first poll. I'm going to ask Jonathan to assist me here. Which phase of the project life cycle are you in now? So are you in initiation, identification, planning or preparation, execution, monitoring, evaluation, or none of the above? You're not in a project, you just want to find out more about project management. So please take the time to great, we're getting some result. Please, everyone. A lot are in execution phase. So we have a few, about 35% that are not in a project right now. So good to know. Okay, so we have the majority that are either executing a project or they're not in a project, they just want to know more information. So I'm glad I did this quick, brief introduction. But you'll see, I'll talk about what are the key tools for each phases. All right, so thank you. We are going to continue with the presentation. All right, so you're in a project, you're not in a project, doesn't matter. It's good to know best practices, and sometimes it's just be aware of terminology. You're talking with your colleagues, you know a project will be started in your department. It's really good to have the basic terminology, tools and techniques that can be used. And don't forget, it's not only in project management, there's some of those tools can be used. They can be used for your HR, for your other functional activities as well. All right. All right, so a lot of project management tools, and that's why we have training that talks about all the key tools for about 2 weeks. So of course, today is only a 45-minute to an hour session, so I won't be able to go dive deep in, but of course I'm encouraging you, once we are back to a more normal situation, to join our trainings. But you see, each phase have different tools that can assist you in making the best of your project. Of course, very important. How do I know my project is successful? Make sure your project are relevant for the situation that you're facing. Make sure that it's fulfilling the needs of your beneficiary. The mistake number one that we do is we design our project in our office. We have limited interaction. I have countless experience with participants sharing where they had difficulty getting projects that were relevant, realizing way too late when the investment is made, when the results are achieved, that maybe that was not quite the need that our beneficiary had. So make sure as well that you're doing effectiveness, efficiency, and fun, having impact, and make sure you think about the sustainability element to it. So what will happen once the project is done? Who will be hosting? Who will be taking care of it? Who will be doing the maintenance of that investment? Okay. All right. So we talked about the golden triangle. We know what's a project. We know what's a program. We know that there's 5 phases to the project life cycle, and there's a lot of tools that we usually do as team that we discuss. We talk with the procurement officer, we talk with our M&E officer, the legal. We're all a multidisciplinary team, and we need to manage this project to ensure that we get the result and be successful. But what happens when we are in the current situation where we have limited movement, not allowed to either go at your workplace, you have to work from home? I would like to suggest to you tonight some tools that can really help you manage your project. All right, so a lot of tools out there. A lot have a free version. So if you're the project manager in it, I'm sure at the beginning there's a lot that you already know, that you use already in your work. So if we talk about communication tool, we're using Zoom, but there's also Microsoft Teams, there's Skype, there's Google Meet, there's WhatsApp. If you're doing just a small group meeting of 4 people now, WhatsApp allow having 4 screens to be sharing. Your daily work, emails and Office, that's quite fine. File sharing as well is very common knowledge now. We're using Dropbox, Google Drive. But I want you to look into the left side of my circle, which I think that's the exciting part that is now happening. We talk about new project management tools that are online, or either through apps, or even they have a web-based version. I'm talking about Trello, Asana, Proof Hub. We have still MS Project that is still very relevant in this context. There's Slack, there's Jira software. In terms of collaborative tools, that's very exciting. I feel it's like a whiteboard. It's a whiteboard where everyone in your team can go and work together. I will show you some example of this today. So Miro is very exciting. It's really a tool that allows you to see maybe your logical framework or resolve framework. You want to do your risk analysis where everybody can do. So collaborative tool, as we are going to see, is very useful if you are at the initiation stage or planning phase. You're really trying to get information sharing, designing your project. You can either use Miro, Jamboard, Concept Board, or Lucidchart. So these 4 are really exciting. I will be focusing today on Miro. For project management, I will be talking about Trello, that has a great app as well that you can use on your smartphone. No need your laptop. Sometimes that's the new way, right? You have so many devices, from the iPad to the phone. And the last one is time management. TimeCamp or Zapier. Zapier is interesting because it's automated process. So if you are dealing with certain emails that you wanted to automatically transfer to a box, or a way that it can be automatically answered, Zapier do that for you. So there's a lot of tools out there, and sometimes we do get lost in all these tools and what's the. And of course, your team has to do a bit of a analysis in choosing which one is right for you. I chose 3 tools to talk about today that will be really interesting, and there are also some that are really rated highly by the project management community. All right, so of course, when we talk about technology, I want to put the caveat that there's always some basic requirement. So before you change your project to full virtual teams, and I'm sure some of you are already there, you're already making WhatsApp calls, you're already, But if you're integrating additional tools, not only Zoom, not only Skype, but additional apps, that your team member, especially if you're a project manager, that your team have access to good internet connection or have a data package for their smartphone. Now we see now that a lot of companies are changing from providing parking fees to say, okay, instead of giving you a package for your mileage or for your parking, I'm going to give you extra for your data. So you get extra amount of data per month, and that's covered by your work. As we find out, as we are locked down, we need to find a space where it's convenient to work. Sometimes some of us will have to work from the kitchen table, a desk. Do you have a headset? Do you have their laptop? So what are the tools? So if you are a project manager, I repeat, make sure that you take the time to assess the capacity of your team to work virtually. And if they do not have the tool, I think it's important to try to invest in some of the either data package or basic tools. From this, it doesn't have to be a laptop, it doesn't have to be a MacBook. We're not trying to tell you to invest in the iPad Pro, not at all. We're just saying make sure that your team have the basic technology to be able to work. You'll find out working on, or if you, I'm sure you discover some of yours, I'm sure doing a lot of Zoom calls or Teams calls. Make sure you schedule your Teams meeting, check in with your team member, are they okay, or their family okay? We'll find out, or if you haven't already, it is very exhausting to be doing virtual call for a long day or having things for a long day on. It is very exhausting. It requires you to be a lot more concentrated than usual. So we'll talk about the best practice and how to make the best of your virtual team meeting at the end of this session. So keep in mind, as we're looking at all these tools, of course, there's a lot of advantages. A lot of people are like, yes, I'm not more in traffic. If you were in Jakarta, you're like, wow, I was making an hour and a half to go to work, and now in 5 minutes, I take a shower and I'm back at the office. So it's great. A lot of people love working from home. You save time in traveling, accessible everywhere and everywhere. That can be pros and cons. That means sometimes you're working very late, very early. The time schedule become a lot more fluid. Some people say, okay, it's higher quality of life. I can take time to cook. I can spend time with my kids while I'm still working. The other feedback we hear is that you can be saving costs. If you were working downtown and now you have to pay for parking, or you have to pay for restaurant, for lunch, for your tea break, of course, now you're saving money. The disadvantages, of course, is that if you do not have the requirement of basic technology to support you, it might be very difficult and you might feel isolated. I'm missing the connection, they cannot hear me. But we've seen the situation where you're like, I cannot hear what's my friend or my colleague is sharing with me, right? The connection is not bad, it's not good enough, it's too bad to fully have a good experience. Communication gap, less bonding, and of course what happens is that if you're less connected than other peers, you might feel that you have some team member have more knowledge than you do. So keep those in mind, but basic requirements, we have to help our teams to be able to do virtual work. All right, so I have my Jonathan, if you can help me with the second poll. What is the main cause or reason for project failure? Is it communication to various stakeholders, managing a difficult project team, lack of preparation and weak processes to implement project, lack of project management knowledge by the manager and team member, or conflict at work? Please participate. We want to hear what you think are the main reasons for project failure. We'll wait a few seconds for the result to come in. I think it's very exciting to see what you think your results are. Just missing the music in the background to create the drama as a TV show. All right, so we have, okay, great. So 7 people think that there's lack of preparation and weak processes to implement project management. Is true. Actually, there's many reasons that why projects fail. The PMI did a survey. They came up with about 6 or 7, and it can be, and the lack of preparation is one of them. Actually, mainly all of this are reasons for project failure. Let's look at it into a bit deeper. Give me 1 second to be able to change my slide. I think after a poll, there's a slide delay. Correct. So the main cause of project failure can be categorized in 3 categories. Either people, managing a team, having conflict in a team, having different understanding, people are not as accountable. People. That's also a big reason. The second, when they did a few surveys with different project managers, the other one is the one you identify, processes, lack of knowledge, lack of preparation or processes to design a good project. So processes has, and of course the last one, we see that sometimes lack of it, too much of it, media take an involvement in your project and in the wrong way. Communication can also cause your project to fail. So knowing these 3 things, that either people, processes, and communication can impact your project. Now, if you're going virtual, are we not increasing the probability for us to fail? And keep in mind, right, that whatever situation, when it's been observed that when your team is more apart, this tension and this communication and people management and processes will be more challenged. So knowing the cause of project failure and how to reduce it, limit it, those failure will really help you. Okay, so keep that in mind as we're managing virtual teams. All right, so I would like to introduce my first collaborative tool. I have to be honest, I fell in love. I don't know if we can do that with a project management tool, but I did. Why? Is because Miro is a collaborative tool. It's really exciting. So you could use your template, and this is example for the initiation phase. When you're analyzing your project, you're just at the beginning, you're trying to understand the needs of the beneficiary, why this project should be put in place in the first place. Then there's all these tools that exist and can be used with Miro. So I'm sure a lot of you know about Pesto. Pesto is about understanding your environment. You look at the political, environmental, sociological, technological, economic, and legal aspect of the situation you're in. So if I'm in Kuala Lumpur City, I need to take this into account if I initiate the project. But this tool is interesting because it's not something that we do one time, right? Malaysia recently changed of government just before the pandemic. That has an impact on my project that I'm managing today. Same thing, now we are in economic and sociological crisis. What we'll do given the situation? So what's interesting is with Miro, and I will show you an example in a bit, is that you can use the template, upload it onto the platform, and everyone can post it to communicate and contribute to their analysis. So there's no longer, like I share you in Dropbox, did you open it? Did you see my latest version 4, with my name on it? This tool is, I can see who clicked what and when. And this can be worked either at the same time or virtually. So that means we could be in a Zoom call and discuss together and start building the analysis together. Again, initiation, we can use the SWOT analysis or the problem and solution tree, the issue tree that a lot of consulting firms use before analyzing a problem. When I'm talking about consulting firm, I'm thinking McKinsey, Deloitte, the terminology they use, it would be issue tree. And they will come up and analyze from the central problem to the different root cause, and what are the effects. And the solution tree gives you the desired situation. So now, instead of doing this work a bit on your own with words and so on, you'll be able to use it with Miro. Other tools to think about, again, those are best practices, is In the planning stage, you want to have your resolve framework, the logical framework, and a classic logical framework. We have also now, there's a lot in the business world, these different canvases that are really exciting, mapping and visual, and there exists now also a project canvas. A project canvas that look into who's the user, what are they going to be benefiting, what's the risk, what's the milestone, and so on. So similar to the logical framework, but in a canvas design. Of course, every project, and we'll see now that we've talked mainly about the PMI or Prince2 traditional projects that are done in large scale, we need to be proactive. And one way to be proactive is to think about our risk and who are involved in this project, the stakeholder management. Now, stakeholder management, I feel even if you're not in a project, is the one-on-one knowledge to know for working in teams with different people who have different interests, right? So it's to analyze what's their interest and what's their power. A few years back, there was a survey by PMI asking them, what, like project manager all around the world, what is the #1 tool? And then it was the work breakdown structure, the WBS schedule pro now, that allows you to divide your project in small components. But we now, with all the technology, for the last few years, there's a lot of exciting tools out there, and Miro is one of them. Miro has already about 2 million users. It allows you to have many people to join within the software, within the website, or even on the app. And you see, you can use different design, or you can upload your own design. So on the screen now, you can see, I can use one of the templates, either mind map or story mapping and so on. And I created my own file, which is my resolve framework, or also known as the logical framework, which is required by a lot of development organizations. World Bank, African Development Bank, and so on. Now we talk more about resolve framework than logical framework. So a lot of tools. So you see, as an individual, I could be working on different boards, and I find that's very exciting at the planning stage, where you're working maybe a bit on your risk, you're working maybe on your stakeholders, you're designing the project, you're mapping, you may be doing your project canvas, and you can be working on these different boards all together at the same time until you agree on the final project plan, your product at the end. So this is an example where I drew my own little sticky note. On the left-hand side, you can drag and drop, you can create videos, it's very exciting when people start working on this. It's like, oh, I'm contributing, oh, no. And then we could just have this conversation with our peers, a few of us, and discussing, and then we agree on where to place our analysis, what are our KPIs, what will be the project that we would like to achieve. Okay. All right, so I mentioned earlier as well that we can do Miro mind map. What's interesting is that instead of having your regular taking your note on Word or Word document, you can use Miro for setting up your meeting agenda, to write your notes of the meeting, visually be appealing. There's really a lot of tools there that you can try and improve. There's a free version, there's a free version where you can have up to 3 boards, and of course, for a small fee, you can have full experience of Miro collaborative. So this is like a whiteboard, allow you to save, share, and create your own project plan if needed. Another tool now, I mentioned 3, so we talked about Miro, and I'm sure we could have a full day training and seen all the advantages and the benefit and the limitation, because not all tools, each tool have the pros and cons, right? For project management, of course, we have our MS project with WBS or W Schedule Pro connecting. That's really exciting, but of course, it has that limitation. It's very detailed. Maybe the visual but it's very good to track your progress, especially during monitoring and evaluation. I would like to introduce you to another tool, which is Trello. Trello is interesting because it can be easily done on your phone, but Trello simplified the process. Simplifying the process in the sense that you could take your real project plan and breaking down. You have on the left side your different project boards, so you could have different components. Each card will be a task, and you can list each task. Are they to do? So it's identifying something I need to do, who is doing it, and when it's done. So it has this interactive tool where you can see your team member, oh, I have 5 tasks to do. I have 5 task cards to complete. I'm going to share to everybody, I'm currently doing this work. And it really focuses, instead of focusing on starting the task, it focuses on you to close. You want to finish, you want to say, hey, look, and it's really user-friendly. Swipe, and you can attach pictures, you can attach Excel, you can prove with evidence that you have achieved this task or you have completed this task. So this brings me like the to-do, doing, and done is a Kabang method, and it's often used in agile project management, right? So the idea of using the Kabang is that it simplifies a complex project to 3 categories, and it allows you to visibly be very attractive. You say, okay, I know what I do. My list is very long on the left-hand side, but my goal is to close it. And of course, you can see the critical dependency between the different tasks. If you don't do yours, maybe your peer cannot or your colleague cannot complete his or part of the project. So it improves efficiency, increase productivity, and it's really encouraging collaborative work, right? So it really pushes you to be accountable because your name is assigned to a specific task. And if it's all yours that are not done, of course, you do feel the team or peer pressure in your team. So when I started to say, wait a minute, what am I talking about when I'm talking about Kabang method? So there's a lot of buzzwords. The past 5 or 10 years, we talk about agile approach. And what is the difference between a traditional approach of project management, as I mentioned earlier, with the 5 phases, a deep, well-constructed, developed project plan versus the agile approach? All right, so if I'm traditional, and there's not one that is better, there are 2 approaches that can be used depending on the nature of your project. So once you start, you're at the initiation phase of your project, you want to decide what type of approach. Am I going to use a traditional approach or I'm going to go for an agile approach? So what's the difference between the 2? So in an organizational structure, it's more linear. Like traditional projects are usually for large-scale projects. So I'm thinking if the World Bank has invested 200 million in a 10-year project, we are talking large-scale project. That means traditional approach, which is a clear project plan. We know what's our objective. We plan it. We have a result framework. We have a procurement plan. We have our budget. We have a well-defined project. Whereas into the agile is for smaller, medium-scale project, and a lot of project that needs to be tested. That means if you're launching a product, you're trying to start a new app, you're in a startup, usually you want to use the agile approach, which is a lot more interactive, that lets you be more testing and experimenting, and if it doesn't work, the whole team start working. So let's say I'm giving you an example. If an e-wallet starts this, they will most likely a new e-wallet enter your market, be in Nigeria, be in Jakarta, any country, Indonesia. You will use agile approach. Why? Because you're testing something new. And if there's a bug on the app and people cannot pay anymore with their application, the whole team will start working on solving this issue. So it's a very dynamic approach where you're doing, we're not doing a full session today on agile, but it has sprint. Scrum Master is really about having this mentor coaching. In the traditional approach, it is about project lifecycle. Where are we in the project lifecycle? If there's an issue, it will be escalated to project manager or even the director and so on. I love the traditional model for the notion of being proactive. So it's a model that thinks about anticipation. That's why we're doing what are the risks. who are people involved? What can happen? Where the agile model will be more, we adapt. We tried, it didn't work. We're correcting. How are we going to do this? And if there's an issue, like the example of the e-wallet, the whole team will work around. So where do we go? I've mainly, and I want you to remember that since the beginning, I mainly referred to the traditional approach of project management as is presented by PMI, the PM box, or even Prince. Why do I talk then about agile? It's because some of these apps can allow you, like the method of Kabang, the to do, win, and done, or a simplified version, even though they are more linked to agile approach, it's not an either or. You can use some of this tool. You can combine some of the approaches, especially in time of crisis. So if you're not together, or your team member, you could simplify some of your Gantt chart that needs to be done in to, doing, and done. All right, long explanation for this, but I hope everybody is still clear with me. Lastly, I would like to talk about Zoom. We are in a Zoom webinar. You can use Zoom for webinar, but as well for group meetings. There's a lot of different tools out there. I mentioned Teams, Skype, WhatsApp, Google Meet. A lot of the advantages with Zoom is that you can set your own background. So I could have created my own picture at the back, and that can be interesting. You can view a lot of participants. Some other tools or video conferencing tools have limitation to see maybe 4 to 6. But if I open up the gallery now, and if we were about 50 people and we decided all to turn on a camera, I could see in the gallery all of you and a large group of people. What is really interesting, especially if you're running session or workshop, you can use the breakout rooms. So the breakout room would be that I could have 5 participants that decide to work on a Miro logical framework within the group. So the breakout room allow you to have the main hall, and you could decide that, let's say you're in a team of 8 or 10, and you say, okay, Jack and Steve, you guys are going to work on the risk for a while. So here I'm assigning you to this breakout room. Let's meet up in half an hour and we share what we've got. So you can split your team in different breakout rooms and come back for common work. And of course, what's really interesting is that session can be recorded as this one. The limitation, of course, is that the free version is up to 40 minutes. So if you have meetings with your group that is longer, you can easily create another link and then continue your meeting, but sometimes it could be creating some frustration. And lately, we see in the news all around the world, be in Singapore or even in the US, Zoom has become so popular in such a short time that we usually suggest to have registration. Just be aware, if you're using Zoom for your work, do not share the link without having some measure, because some people have entered Zoom to either hack, intervene, and so on. So the government of Singapore has banned using Zoom. Malaysia, where I'm located now as well, all government agencies decided not to use Zoom for those reasons. So you have to keep those in mind when you choose your video conferencing tool. All right, so just be aware of Zoom fatigue. I hope you're still with me during this session. I cannot see your interaction, but that's one of the session when, or negative impact is that you don't see the nonverbal communication if you're doing group work or you're with your peers. You might not have the full control of what's happening. So my kids could be running here and intervene the session. We should not underestimate the need to, from time to time, just having that chat that you used to have at the office, at the water cooler, having tea, having breakfast at your table. All these chat do make a difference, right? Because you connect. Now you're losing that connection. Some research also showed that you're seeing your face. Well, you're like, oh my God, you become self-conscious of how you look, how you talk, what you say. And The problem is to stay connected, especially an hour is maybe manageable, but if you're connected for a few hours, people tend to start looking at their phone. They look like they're present here with you, but they are doing something else on different websites or on their phone and looking. So be aware of Zoom fatigue. It takes a lot of energy. So plan your team meetings. Make sure you check in with your team members. And I'm sure we can overcome this pandemic, this crisis. It might last for a few months or even 1 or 2 years, but hopefully having all the tools in place to manage work virtually will be exciting. So I can welcome Jean-Michel some Q&A, where I realize I have only 5 minutes left.
Good evening, Patricia, and to our fellow attendees in Bangladesh. Good afternoon to all of you from Nigeria, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, for those who mentioned from where they were from at the beginning. Good morning to all of you from Canada, United States, Dominican Republic. So I'm Jean-Michel, Director of SETYM International, and I'm pleased to be with you for this short Q&A session for two reasons. Because as you mentioned, there's a Zoom fatigue. We cannot go on for days and days on Zoom forever. It just doesn't fit. And first, I think, and I would like to confirm with Taibur Rahman, I guess from Bangladesh, who has asked a question at the beginning, very relevant one, but I think to me, you have answered pretty much of it, is how to lead the project management in crisis situation. So you've pointed out moving to more virtual teams. You've pointed out as well moving to a more agile way of doing it, because I think more than ever, we cannot foresee, we need more than trying to anticipate, because it's no longer possible to anticipate what will happen in the upcoming months. We will more being in a more adaptive way of doing projects. So I think that was well answered. And if it's not the case, please get back to us with a more specific question if that has not answered. We have you've pointed out some very interesting tool this morning, and I can only reinforce the two that you have specifically pointed out about Miro. This is, you can do a lot for free, and otherwise it's not that expensive, and you can do a lot of good project management work with it. And Trello as well, I can only reinforce and encourage and specify on a personal note that it's very easy to use. Even my kids at primary schools are using it. Their teachers is tracking their daily work with it, and they're able to manage at 7 and 10 years old. So these are tools easy to catch, because we cannot spend weeks to learn about these tools. But would you know any specific tools to track down documentation? The question was asked by Eka Namakule. Do you know any specific tools for that, or you would use Trello or any others?
Of course, for file sharing, but I understand the question as more documenting. How do I archive my file, right?
That's how I understand it as well.
You know, it's how to classify, because I do agree it's a headache, right? Especially if you're for years working in the same field. I don't have a tool at the top of my mind. I know Zapier that I mentioned earlier can help you to transfer emails. You know, if you want to archive some certain emails, you could automate that with Zapier. It allows you to say, okay, I want all these emails, or maybe this beneficiary to be placed in a special folder and so on. But do it archive your document from your desktop? I don't think so. You know, it would be from an app to another app. You know what I mean? Like from my email to or from my social, if my company or even my government agency receive a lot of complaints, I could manage all these complaints that come in and be classified to a certain area, so we can automatically respond to those Yes, it's a good one. I think I will have to do further research for
And we
archiving.
encourage everyone that would have a good tool to point out to us this morning
I
to
think
write
people
it
can
down in
write
the
in the
chat.
chat.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
Jean-Michel, if there's anyone that knows the tool, please share in the chat. I mean, I concentrated on a few today, but there's a lot out there. That's the problem, is that sometimes
That's a
too
problem.
much. But I think the three that I've shared are really becoming mainstream, really user-friendly. As you mentioned, one of the question was, how fast can I learn this? You know, if I need to be in a class for hours, if I can learn it in, like, it becomes very easy to learn and adapt, then you'll use it in your work. You know?
Exactly, and that's what I like with Miro. You spend about 30 minutes, 35 minutes, and you're on, and you can start working on it.
And what I see so far, people get excited. It's like, oh, I can do my post-it here, you can do yours. We really feel like we're creating something together. So if you're doing your project documents, you're really doing it together. You're having that discussion, saying, oh no, this post-it, and the nice thing is it doesn't have to be written on an actual physical post-it note. It can be moved and transferred and discussed.
Exactly. There's a question from Jane Fagbohon, who is saying what would be to you the best platform to use when you're planning for an online conference with more than 3,500 persons or like.
Oh wow, 3,500 people. That's a lot of people.
Yeah. I know that Zoom, you can go up to 10,000 people. I mean, if you're doing like a webinar with web camera, you can see with the gallery up to 99%. I know that you can do a more conference style than a webinar like we're doing this morning, up to 10,000.
Well, it depends. You know, I think, like you said, Zoom can accept a lot of people, especially in the webinar. Zoom has different packages, right? The Zoom Pro, Zoom for Education, so that you can get the larger group. But I don't know if you're running a full conference. Zoom is good to explore because it has breakout rooms. So if you have special panelists, in a click of a button, you could say these 100 people or these, because it's 3,500. Let's say I have 400 people that are going to talk about the the SDG. Sorry. In a click, of course, I recommend I have someone like Jonathan, who is your technician, where you can assign, and in a click of a button, you're getting transferred to a breakout room. You just click join. Please select your individuals to join, and then you can bring them back to the main hall. And that's very interesting because you can have these different discussions happening in the same platform and record all of them at the same time.
Totally agree, because otherwise you cannot give everybody's chatting and at the end with 3,500 person it becomes too difficult to follow.
You could have the opening with 3,500 people connected. You would see the number, and then for different section of your event, hit them for different panels that they have to listen.
And assigning them, if I'm correct, randomly or by regions.
Or you can plan in advance. You know, you could have your list of candidates and so on. Just be aware of security. Make sure whoever because the challenge we feel now, people are just sharing the link and there's no registration. So if there's no registration, anyone can come into your Zoom call and actually have inappropriate behavior, asking questions, disturbing, raising hand, or saying things that are not really and really nice. And sometimes you might not know that they're not your participant. They're just here to disturb your session.
Yeah, indeed. I'm going to wrap it up for two questions, because again we want to keep it to an hour webinar. Well, can we access the record version of this program? Yes, you can. If you go on our website on setym.com/webinar, you can access this webinar and not all, but most of the webinars that we're offering every week. We will have more to come in the upcoming days and weeks. We offer them in French and English. The next one in English, just to point out, which might be very interesting in this time of crisis, is going to be on HR. So next Thursday, we'll have one that will be on happiness at work. By next week, we'll jump to a more financial aspect of the crisis, which will be the more and less likely macroeconomic implication of the great lockdown, and so on. We will continue having these on leadership and other topics that normally SETYM covers in our regular seminars. For now, the seminars have been postponed up to August or September. But again, as we cannot foresee what's going to happen, we will adapt and keep you informed accordingly. If I may conclude with one last question that was asked by somebody anonymous, how can we contact you, Patricia, and get advice from for our career or work-related advice? You have, if you're already part of the SETYM family, you should have received an email offering you for the help with the technical assistance. So if you're interested in getting advice, you please send us the request, the question, and we'll get back to you if you formulate again a specific and concise question. We can get back to you, whatever is subject, either it's project management, procurement, governance, financial accountability, and so on. So, well, we'll close it here. Thank you very much, Patricia. Terima kasih banyak.
Thank you, Larbi.